You were not born into silence. You were born into hunger. The first sound you ever heard was not your mother's voice, not your father's breath, but the dull, hollow growl of an empty stomach. It came from the woman holding you, a sound so deep and constant that it no longer meant pain. It meant survival. She did not cry. Tears require water, and water was already being saved for something more important: staying alive. You don't remember this moment, but your body does. Your body remembers the cold, even in summer. It remembers hunger as a background noise of existence. You were born in a house made of mud and rotting wood. The roof had been leaking for so long that no one reacted when water dripped onto the floor. In winter, it froze into thin sheets of ice. In summer, it smelled of mold and decay. That smell became the smell of home. Your mother gave you a name that had already belonged to 2 children before you. Neither survived. The name passed from body to body like an old shirt until someone lived long enough for it to matter. Your father stood near the wall and stared at the ground. He did not hold you. Not because he didn't care, but because he had learned not to attach himself too early. In the village, people said it hurt less if you didn't look a newborn in the eyes during the first weeks. That way, when the breathing stopped, it didn't break you completely. You were thin, not just small, unfinished, as if your body hadn't yet decided whether life was worth the effort. Your skin clung to bone like wet cloth. Your belly was swollen, not from food, but from emptiness and air. The famine did not arrive suddenly. It crept in. First, the harvest failed. Then the rain destroyed what little remained. Then the Lord's men came and took the grain for taxes. Then winter stayed longer than it should have. And finally, everyone understood that there would be no food. You grew up in a world where the word tomorrow lost its meaning. Because tomorrow never changed. Your mother fed you water that once held porridge. She poured it into a cracked bowl, let it cool, and gave it to you, hoping the memory of food would trick your body into staying alive. Sometimes she chewed straw, soaked it with saliva, and placed it into your mouth. Not because she believed in miracles, but because there was nothing else left. You cried often, at first, then less. Hunger teaches quickly. It teaches that crying does not bring food, and the body learns not to waste energy on sound. The village grew quiet, not peaceful, efficient. Voices dropped to whispers. Movements slowed. Everyone seemed afraid of waking something worse than hunger itself. Chickens disappeared first, then dogs, then cats, then even the rats were gone. You learned to walk late, not because you were weak, but because the floor was cold and falling hurt. When you finally took your first steps, your mother did not smile. She only exhaled. Another mouth could now reach the fire and ask for food. When you were 5, you felt true hunger for the first time. Not the hunger you were born with, but the kind you understand. When your stomach twists inward, when it tries to consume itself, when the world narrows into a single thought. Food. You remember that day. Your father left for the fields before sunrise. He returned with empty hands. He sat against the wall and stared at nothing. Then he stood up, took a knife, and left again. You didn't know where he went, but your mother cried, real tears, for the first time in a long while. He came back with meat. No one asked where it came from. It was tough, bitter, with a taste you would never forget. You ate slowly, silently, afraid that if you swallowed too fast, it would disappear. That night, you didn't sleep. Your stomach hurt in a different way, from holding something real. The next day, one person in the village was gone. You began to understand, not with words, but with instinct. Life here was not about work and reward. It was about choices no one wanted to make. Sometimes, for someone to live, someone else had to disappear. Hunger changes people. It erases the line between right and survival. It turns kindness into silence, strength into cruelty, and children into the old. You saw a woman trade her wedding ring for a sack of flour. The flour was mixed with sawdust. She thanked the man as if he had given her life. You saw an old neighbor stop leaving his house. A few days later, the house stood empty. No one closed the door. There was no reason to. You heard whispers about people eating things they should never eat. You didn't understand the details. No one wanted to explain. Children learn by not asking. One morning, you woke up and realized your mother wasn't breathing. You called her softly, then louder. Then you touched her hand, cold, light, as if she no longer belonged to the world. Your father came, looked once, and sat beside her. For a long time. She wasn't buried immediately, not out of disrespect, out of exhaustion. You sat near the fire and stared into the flames. They were weak, flickering, almost like you. You didn't know then that this was only the beginning. Hunger had not taken everything from you yet. It was only getting familiar. Hunger doesn't end after it takes someone. It stays. After your mother died, nothing became quieter. Nothing became easier. The house felt the same, cold, empty, waiting. The only thing that changed was the way your father moved, slower. He no longer rushed, no longer reacted quickly, as if speed had stopped meaning anything. You stopped asking questions, not because you understood the answers, but because questions required hope. Your days became simple. Wake up, sit, walk when told. Search the ground with your eyes, not for beauty, not for signs of life, only for something that could be eaten. You learned what hunger really was. Not pain, but control. Hunger decided when you stood, when you rested, when you spoke. It decided how long your thoughts could stretch before collapsing back into silence. Your father taught you how to survive without explaining why. He showed you which roots made your tongue numb instead of killing you, which leaves caused sickness, and which only caused weakness. You watched him test food the way others once tested wine, cautiously, with fear hiding behind routine. Sometimes he would chew first. If he swallowed, you were allowed to eat. If he spat it out, you learned to remember the shape of that plant forever. Your body changed. Your arms grew thin and long. Your joints looked too large, like they belonged to someone older. Your skin clung to bone, not tightly, but desperately, as if it feared slipping off. You stopped growing the way children are supposed to grow. You grew inward instead. At night, you dreamed of food you had never eaten. Bread that broke softly in your hands. Soup that warmed your chest before your stomach. Meat that didn't taste like regret. You woke up angry at yourself for dreaming of things your body no longer remembered. In the village, people stopped pretending this was temporary. The word famine stopped being whispered and started being accepted. Like weather, like death. You saw neighbors trade anything that could still be traded. Tools, blankets, pieces of furniture. Even doors were removed from houses and exchanged for handfuls of grain. Privacy became a luxury no one could afford. One morning, you watched a man eat grass, slowly, carefully, as if he were afraid the earth would notice and pull it away from him. Children disappeared first. Not all at once. One by one. Some were sent away to relatives who never existed. Some were traded for food with promises that were never kept. Some simply stopped waking up. No announcements were made. No goodbyes were spoken. Everyone understood. You became useful. Your father sent you to the fields with others like you. Small, quiet bodies that still had enough strength to bend without breaking. You pulled weeds not to help crops grow, but to search for insects beneath the soil. Anything that moved became food. You learned to swallow without chewing. One day, you found a bird caught in a snare that someone had forgotten. It was already dead, stiff, smelled wrong. You held it in your hands for a long time, unsure if touching it made you lucky or cursed. You brought it home anyway. That night, you ate better than you had in weeks. The next day, you were sick. Your father said nothing. He just waited. Survival did not include comfort. As weeks passed, hunger stopped feeling sharp. It became dull, constant, like a weight pressing on your chest. You could breathe, but never deeply. You could think, but never far. People began to look alike. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, bent backs, faces that no longer showed age, only exhaustion. You couldn't tell who was 30 and who was 60. Hunger erased time. One evening, your father didn't come home. You waited, then waited longer. You didn't cry. Crying would not bring him back. You sat near the fire and stared into the ashes, trying to remember the sound of his footsteps. They never came. The next morning, someone told you he had collapsed in the field. No one knew how long he lay there. No one had stopped to check. You were alone. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just factually. You slept in the same house, ate the same nothing, walked the same paths. The world did not react to your loss. And slowly, you understood something important. No one was coming to save you. Being alone did not feel sudden. It felt expected. After your father disappeared, the days didn't collapse. They simply continued without him. You woke up where you always had. You walked the same paths. You searched the ground the same way. Hunger did not respect loss. It only respected endurance. You were still a child, but childhood had no function anymore. There was no one to protect, no one to teach gently, no one to soften the edges of the world. You learned by watching, by copying, by surviving quietly enough to be ignored. You slept where you could, sometimes in your own house, sometimes near others, sometimes near animals that were no longer alive but still provided warmth. No one chased you away. No one invited you in. You existed in the spaces people forgot to guard. You learned the rules without hearing them spoken. Do not ask for food. Do not take unless you can run. Do not trust kindness. Do not show weakness. Hunger had changed the village into something else. People still lived close together, but no longer together. Eyes avoided each other. Conversations were short, practical, empty of comfort. Everyone carried loss like an injury they no longer mentioned. You watched people count ribs on their own bodies. Not in mirrors, there were none, but with fingers, slowly checking how much was left. You learned to do the same. Your reflection in water no longer looked like a child. Your face was narrow, your eyes too large, your shoulders sharp. You looked unfinished, like something abandoned before it was completed. Sometimes older villagers would look at you and hesitate, not out of kindness, out of calculation. You were small, weak, alone, but still breathing. You understood what that meant before anyone had to explain it. You stayed visible. You stayed useful. You offered yourself for work no one wanted, carrying, cleaning, digging shallow graves, anything that made people see you as necessary instead of expendable. You stopped dreaming of food. Now you dreamed of sleep. One night you heard crying, not loud, controlled, someone trying not to be heard. You followed the sound and found a woman sitting beside a body wrapped in cloth. Too small to be an adult, too still to be alive. She looked at you, then looked away. "Go," she said quietly, not angrily, just firmly. You went. You learned that grief was private now. Hunger had taken away the right to be witnessed. As weeks passed, fewer people walked the paths. Fewer fires burned at night. Houses emptied slowly, not from movement, but from absence. Doors stayed open. Windows broke and were never fixed. The village felt hollow, like a body that had already lost too much blood. One day you collapsed. Not dramatically, not loudly. Your legs simply stopped responding. The ground rose to meet you. You lay there, watching dust move in the air, thinking that this might be how it ends. Someone stepped around you. Someone else stepped over you. Eventually, a hand pulled you up. A man you barely knew, older, thin, still standing. "Don't lie down," he said. "If you lie down, you won't get up." He gave you a piece of bread so small it fit between two fingers. You ate it without tasting it. He didn't wait for thanks. You followed him after that, worked where he worked, slept where he slept. Not as family, as arrangement. Survival was shared only when it benefited both sides. You stopped counting days. You stopped counting losses. You counted only one thing now: how long you could stay alive without becoming a burden. And every morning, you woke up surprised that you were still here. The famine did not end with relief. It ended with absence. One spring, the rain stopped destroying the fields. The ground hardened. New growth appeared, thin, weak, but alive. People began to speak again, cautiously, as if afraid words might break what little had returned. Food came back slowly, too slowly for many. By the time grain could be eaten again, the village was no longer a village. Half the houses were empty. Some had collapsed. Others stood untouched, holding memories no one wanted to enter. You were still alive. Not strong, not healthy, but alive. Your body bore the marks of hunger long after hunger loosened its grip. You remained smaller than others your age. Your bones never fully filled out. Your stomach never trusted fullness. Even when food was available, you ate slowly, waiting for it to disappear. You watched children younger than you play, laugh, waste energy. You did not join them. That part of you had not survived. People spoke of rebuilding, of planting more, of preparing for the next winter better than the last. You listened without believing. Hunger teaches skepticism. You learned a trade eventually, something simple, something physical, work that did not require hope, only repetition, only endurance. Sometimes, at night, when you lay alone, you thought of your parents. Not their faces, those had faded, but their presence. The weight of another body nearby, the sound of breathing in the dark. You wondered if they would recognize the person you had become. You wondered if you would have recognized yourself. Years later, when the famine became a story instead of a reality, people spoke of it carefully, as something terrible but finished, as something survived. They did not speak of the children who never grew. They didn't speak of the choices no one wanted to remember. They did not speak of how hunger stayed inside those who lived. But you remembered. You remembered how silence felt heavier than screams. You remembered how survival demanded things you never wanted to give. You remembered learning that life does not promise fairness, only continuation. You lived, not because you were chosen, not because you were strong, but because you endured long enough for hunger to move on. And even then, it never truly left you.